Alright, so we're going to continue with lesson 10.5, and we're still going to look at angles that are related to a circle. In 10.5 day 1, we looked at angles where the vertex was at the center of the circle or on the center of the circle. In this lesson, what we're going to look at are angles where the vertex is outside the circle or inside the circle. So the first one is going to be where the angles are inside the circle. This is called a chord angle. So basically what happens, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, is if you have a chord, so there's a chord, and let's say you have another chord, what you're forming are, well actually you're forming 4 angles, but let's just focus on one. Here's an angle right there. So you can find the measure of that angle if you know what these arcs are formed by the 2 chords. And so if we look at over here, you can see the angle is on the inside of, or the vertex of the angle is on the inside of the circle. So here's our vertex of that angle. It's on the inside of the circle. So what we do, I'm going to rewrite this a little bit. The angle is equal to half of the sum. Now sum means adding, so we're going to add the sum of the arcs. Okay, so what we would do is we would define the angle measure right here. We would add up this arc, and then multiply it by 1/2. So a quick little example right here. If we wanted to find, let's say, the measure of this angle right here. Now remember, we do have vertical angles that are formed with these 2 chords. So the angle vertical to it would be the same measure. So whichever one you're trying to find, you do the same math. So what you do is you take the arc formed by those 2 chords and then the other arc formed by those two chords. Because the vertex is on the inside of the circle, so here's the vertex of that angle right there, you're going to do 1/2 times the sum. So we're going to add up the 2 arc measures. And then 100 plus 40 is 140, so 1/2 of 140 gives us a 70-degree angle. So that's how that works if the vertex is on the inside of, there we go, the inside of the circle. That's a chord angle. Alright, so now what if the vertex of your angle is on the outside of the circle? So you can see we have our 3 examples from we've seen these before. You have your secant angle, secant tangent angle, and tangent angle. So the angle measure that we're trying to find is the angle formed by those 2 secants or tangents right there. So a secant angle, you can see you have a secant. Remember, it's going to go through and cross this or hit the circle in 2 spots, and another secant. So we have a way to find that angle measure. The secant tangent angle, so here's the tangent. Remember, it's going to hit the circle in 1 spot on the edge. That's your point of tangency. So if you have a tangent and a secant, we can find the angle measure out there. And then if you have 2 tangents, we've seen this before, we can find this angle measure by looking at the arcs. So the way that this works, back in the other slide or just up above in the notes we have, the angle is going to be equal to 1/2 times, now this time instead of the sum of the arcs, it's going to be the difference of the arcs. And difference is subtracting. That says arcs, even though it's hard to read. So we're going to subtract the arcs. So let's just make sure we know which arcs we're talking about. So in the secant angle, what we're looking at is the arcs formed by those 2 secants. So here's one of the arcs and here's the other arc. So what you would want to do is always start with the bigger arc. We're just going to take the bigger arc minus the smaller arc and then multiply it by 1/2, and that will give you that angle measure. So when the angle is on the outside of the circle, we subtract the arc measures. All right, if we have a secant tangent, so let's just make sure again we know which arcs we're talking about. So it's the arcs formed by those two, by the secant and the tangent. So here is one of them. So this is one arc measure. The other arc measure is going to be this one right there. So they do look like they kind of connect in that spot, and that's okay. So if you have this arc measure and this arc measure, we'll subtract them, the bigger one minus the smaller one, and then multiply by 1/2 to get the angle measure. Alright, so tangent angle, if you have two tangents, what you're going to do is and the angle is on the outside of your circle, you're going to subtract the two arcs. So remember, the arc is formed by the two tangents. So here's one arc, and the other arc is on the inside. So you would take the bigger arc minus the smaller arc and then multiply by 1/2 to get the measure of this angle out here.